I'm parked right now, directly under the harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights of a 24-hour gas station. I've locked all 4 doors. Every single one. The engine is running. The heater is blasting. And God, I have every interior light turned on. I'm sitting here, completely surrounded by concrete and artificial light, and I just can't stop my hands from shaking against the steering wheel. I'm a county cop. Look, I know I've only been on the force for 2 years, but I have a reputation. I'm strict. I'm thorough. I rely on protocol. I like rules, okay? I like guidelines. In this job, the manual is supposed to be your best tool. You follow the steps, you run the plates, you approach the vehicle at the exact right angle, and you eliminate variables. You maintain control. That's how it's supposed to work. My assigned patrol sector is this massive, desolate stretch of a 2-lane county highway. It's lonely out there, just incredibly isolated. The road runs along the eastern edge of a huge, deep freshwater lake, and the geography, there is absolutely nothing out there. On the left side of the highway, just a steep, rocky embankment. It drops straight down into the black water. And on the right, just this endless, dense expanse of thick pine forest. There are no houses, no streetlights, not a single intersecting road for over 40 miles. It's just a ribbon of dark asphalt, trapped right between the deep woods and the deep water. I work the graveyard shift, 10 at night until 6 in the morning. Usually, the entire 8-hour shift is just driving back and forth in complete silence, just listening to the hum of my tires, the occasional crackle of the dispatch radio. Sometimes I pull over a trucker who missed a turn, or some local kid driving way too fast. It's quiet, predictable. Tonight started exactly like every other night. It was clear out, but God, it was cold. A thick layer of fog was rolling off the surface of the lake, creeping right over the embankment and drifting across the asphalt. I was just cruising at 40, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee, scanning the dark road ahead with my headlights. Then, right around 2:15 a.m., I saw a vehicle a few miles up ahead. I sped up a bit to close the gap. It was this dark-colored minivan, an older model. It was going way under the speed limit, moving at maybe 30 miles per hour. And as I got closer, I noticed 2 things. First, the passenger side taillight was completely burned out. Second, it was swerving, not violently, just this slow drifting weave. The tires drifted over the solid yellow line, corrected slowly, and then drifted right back over the white line near the edge of the lake. The protocol here is clear. A burned-out taillight is a minor violation, but combined with the swerving, it establishes reasonable suspicion. DUI, or maybe extreme fatigue. I had to initiate a traffic stop. I didn't have a choice. I pulled up behind the minivan, kept a safe distance of 3 car lengths. I reached down to the center console and flipped the switch for my overheads. The flashing red and blue strobes instantly lit up the dark highway, reflecting off the thick pine trees on the right, cutting straight through that fog drifting off the lake on the left. The driver, they reacted so slowly. It took them almost a quarter of a mile just to register the lights in their mirror. Eventually, the right turn signal blinked. The van slowly pulled over onto the narrow gravel shoulder. It came to a stop. Jesus, just a few feet away from the steep drop-off into the water. I pulled my cruiser onto the shoulder behind them. I followed my training exactly. I really did. Offset the vehicle slightly to the left. Angled the front wheels toward the road, just like the manual says. I put the transmission in park. I unbuckled my seatbelt, and I grabbed my heavy metal flashlight. I stepped out. The cold night air hit me immediately. The only sounds out there, just the low rumble of our two idling engines, the crunch of the gravel under my boots. And down below, the faint rhythmic lapping of the lake water just hitting the rocks at the bottom of the embankment. I walked up to the rear of the minivan. I reached out with my left hand and pressed my palm firmly against the trunk lid. Standard protocol. You leave your fingerprints on the vehicle. That way, if something happens to you, investigators have physical proof. Proof you were standing exactly there, right behind that specific car. But the metal of the trunk, it felt unusually cold and damp. I walked up the driver's side, kept my flashlight pointed low. I stopped just behind the driver's window. I angled my body, so I wasn't an easy target if she threw the door open aggressively. I tapped the glass. The window rolled down manually with this awful squeaking sound. I shined the beam of my flashlight into the interior. And it was a perfectly normal family. The driver was a middle-aged woman. She looked incredibly exhausted. Her hair was a mess, and she had these dark, heavy bags under her eyes. She squinted hard against the glare of my light. Sitting in the passenger seat, a middle-aged man, wearing a plaid flannel shirt. His head was tilted back against the headrest. His eyes were closed, just lightly snoring. He looked completely relaxed. I swept the beam to the back seat. 2 young kids, a boy and a girl, maybe 8 or 9. They were both fast asleep, their heads leaning right against the cold glass of the side windows. There was a pile of blankets and pillows shoved between them. It looked exactly like a family pushing through the final exhausting hours of a long road trip. "Good evening, ma'am," I said. I kept my voice polite but firm. "I'm stopping you tonight because your passenger side taillight is completely out. And, I noticed you are having some trouble maintaining your lane." The woman rubbed her face with this heavy, tired hand. "I am so sorry, officer," she said. Her voice was quiet, really hoarse. "We've been driving for a very long time. We just wanted to get there before morning. I guess I'm more tired than I realized." "It happens," I replied, "but driving exhausted on this stretch of highway, it's dangerous, especially this close to the water. I need to see your license, registration, and proof of insurance, please." She reached across the sleeping man in the passenger seat, opened a glove compartment, and pulled out a small stack of papers. She handed them to me, along with a plastic driver's license. But when her fingers brushed against mine, her skin felt freezing cold. It felt exactly like touching a block of ice. I'm going to take these back to my cruiser and run your information," I told her. "I'll be right back. Please remain in the vehicle." She didn't say anything. She just gave me this slow, tired nod and looked straight ahead through the windshield. I turned around and walked back to my cruiser, climbed into the driver's seat, pulled the heavy door shut. I dropped the license and registration on the center console and turned on the overhead dome light so I could read the fine print. I picked up the radio mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I'm initiating a traffic stop on a dark-colored minivan, requesting a plate check." The radio crackled. The dispatcher tonight was an older woman. She usually worked the quiet shifts. "Copy that, Unit 4. Go ahead with the plate number." I read the alphanumeric sequence right off the registration paper. "Copy," she replied. "Stand by. The system is running a little slow tonight." I put the microphone down. I settled back into the seat, just enjoying the warm air blowing from the heater vents. The heavy protocol of the stop was complete. Now I just had to wait for the computer system to verify the documents. Write a simple warning ticket for the broken taillight. Tell the tired mother to pull over and get some rest. But while I waited, I glanced down at my center console. Mounted right below the radio is a small, heavy-duty monitor It displays the live video feed from the cruiser's dashboard camera. The camera records continuously during a traffic stop. It captures everything that happens directly in front of my vehicle. The video is strictly black and white, designed to catch high-contrast details like license plates in low-light conditions. Out of pure, ingrained habit, I looked at the monitor just to make sure the camera was recording the minivan. And I stopped breathing. The image on the small screen was wrong. It was entirely, fundamentally wrong. I stared at the screen. My brain was just struggling to process what I was seeing. The camera was pointed directly at the space in front of my cruiser. The red and blue strobes were flashing across the scene, alternating waves of bright white and deep black. But the vehicle on the monitor, it was not the minivan I had just walked away from. The van on the screen was crushed. The roof was caved entirely inward. The metal frame bent completely down toward the seats. The rear bumper was twisted, hanging off by a single rusted bolt. The entire exterior was completely covered in thick, dark, hanging layers of aquatic algae and river weeds. The tires were flat, rotting, half buried in thick mud. It looked exactly like a vehicle that had been pulled from the bottom of a lake after decades underwater. But that wasn't the part that made my blood run cold. The dashboard camera was positioned directly behind the rusted, crushed rear window of the van. The glass was shattered, and looking out through that broken back window, staring directly into the lens of the dashboard camera, were 4 faces. They were bloated. They were skeletal. The flesh on their faces was gray, peeling away from the bone in wet, ragged strips. Their eye sockets were empty. Dark, hollow pits filled with stagnant water. They were pressed tightly together in the back of the crushed vehicle. The mother, the father, the 2 children, they were all looking directly at the camera, and they were smiling. It wasn't a natural expression. Their jawbones were pulled back, stretching that rotting, waterlogged skin into wide, unnatural, gaping grins. They were completely motionless, suspended in the grainy black and white feed, just staring and smiling at the lens. A wave of suffocating panic slammed into my chest. I gripped the edges of the monitor so hard my knuckles turned white. I prayed. The camera system was just malfunctioning. I tore my eyes away from the screen. I looked up, straight through my windshield. Parked 20 feet in front of me was the pristine, dark-colored minivan. The metal was clean. The roof was perfectly intact. The red glow of the functional brake light illuminated the gravel shoulder. Through the back window, I could see the silhouette of the 2 children sleeping peacefully under their blankets. I could see the mother looking into her side mirror. Watching my cruiser, everything was perfectly normal. I looked back down at the monitor. The crushed, rusted, algae-covered wreckage was still there. The 4 rotting, skeletal corpses were still there, but they had moved. The mother had raised her hand. A skeletal, bloated arm, covered in peeling wet skin and thick green weeds, was pressed against the shattered glass of the rear window. She was tapping on the glass from the inside. I couldn't hear the rhythmic hitting through the heavy doors of my cruiser, but I could see it. I could see the bone of her finger striking the lens on the screen, over and over again, and they were still smiling. That wide, gaping, impossible grin. I felt dizzy. I reached forward with a shaking hand and physically hit the side of the monitor, just hoping to reset the feed. The screen flickered, but the image remained. The bloated corpses just continued to stare. Suddenly, the radio crackled loudly. It shattered the heavy silence in the cruiser. "Unit 4, this is dispatch," the older woman's voice said. She sounded deeply confused. Her professional tone had completely slipped. I grabbed the microphone. I was fumbling with the cord. "Unit 4, go ahead." I ran the plates and the license. She said slowly, "Are you absolutely sure you read that sequence correctly? Are you sure you were looking at a dark minivan?" "Yes," I stammered. My eyes were darting back and forth between the pristine van out the windshield and the nightmare on the screen. "I am parked right behind it. Why?" "The system flagged the registration," the dispatcher said. "Those plates belong to a vehicle that was involved in a major missing persons case. 30 years ago, I felt the blood completely drain from my face. Missing? A family of 4. She read from her screen. They were driving cross-country. They were last seen at a gas station near your current location. The police searched for weeks. The primary theory was that the driver fell asleep at the wheel and the vehicle went off the embankment into the lake. They never found the car. They never found the bodies. The license you gave me, it belongs to the mother. Her status is listed as legally dead." The radio went dead silent. I sat there, completely frozen in the driver's seat. The heater was blowing hot air right onto my face, but I was shivering uncontrollably. I slowly raised my head and looked through the windshield. The pristine minivan was gone. It hadn't driven away. I hadn't heard the engine start. I hadn't heard the tires crunching on the gravel. The red brake light was simply gone. The space in front of my cruiser was completely empty. I reached up. I engaged the mechanical lever for the high-powered spotlight mounted on the driver's side pillar. I twisted the handle, aiming the bright beam of light directly at the patch of gravel where the van had been parked seconds ago. There were no tire tracks. Instead, covering the gravel shoulder was a massive puddle of thick, black, stagnant water. The water was actively bubbling, seeping quickly into the dirt. And then a horrible, foul smell began to enter the air vents of my cruiser. It smelled like dead fish, rotting wood, and ancient, stagnant mud. I looked down at the dashboard monitor. The screen was displaying a live feed of the empty gravel shoulder and the puddle of water. The crushed van was gone. The corpses were gone. I dropped the radio mic onto the passenger seat. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely grab the gear shift. I needed to put the cruiser in drive. I needed to turn around and drive away from the lake, as fast as the engine would allow. Protocol didn't matter anymore. I just needed to leave. I grabbed the gear shift. I pulled it down into drive. But before my foot could even touch the accelerator, the entire patrol cruiser violently lurched. A massive concussive impact slammed into the right side of the vehicle. The heavy metal frame of the Ford Explorer groaned under the sudden stress. My head snapped to the right, slamming into the headrest. The cruiser was moving. It was being dragged sideways. Something was pulling the 2-ton police vehicle across the gravel shoulder, dragging it directly toward the steep embankment, directly toward the black water of the lake. I slammed my foot down on the gas pedal. The powerful engine roared. The RPM needle jumped straight into the red. The rear tires spun frantically, kicking up a massive cloud of gravel, dirt, and mud. The tires shrieked, trying to find traction on the loose shoulder, but the sideways momentum was too strong. We were sliding toward the edge. I turned my head. I looked out the passenger side window. The lake was churning. The dark, flat surface of the water was boiling, sending thick white foam crashing against the rocks. And rising out of the freezing black water were 4 figures. It was the family. The mother, the father, the 2 children. But they weren't human anymore. They were the bloated, skeletal, rotting corpses from the camera monitor. Their flesh was gray and peeling. Their empty eye sockets stared blankly at my cruiser. Their jaws were unhinged, locked into that wide, horrific grin. They were suspended in the air. Attached to the back of each rotting corpse was a massive, thick, muscular appendage. They looked like dark, wet, glistening tentacles. thicker than tree trunks. Emerging from the deep water of the lake, the tentacles were fused directly into the spines of the corpses, using the dead human bodies like fleshy, rotting puppets. The tentacles extended from the lake, reaching up the rocky embankment. The rotting puppet corpses of the family were pressed directly against the side of my cruiser. Their bloated skeletal hands were gripping the window frames, the door handles, the wheel wells. The strength of those appendages was impossible. They were dragging the heavy police cruiser sideways through the deep gravel, inch by agonizing inch, pulling me closer to the drop-off. The smell of the stagnant water and the rotting flesh was overwhelming. It filled the entire cabin. The metal doors buckled inward under the crushing pressure. The passenger side window shattered, spraying tiny cubes of safety glass all across the front seat. One of the bloated, rotting arms reached through the broken window. The skeletal fingers, dripping with thick lake mud, grabbed the fabric of my passenger seat, pulling the cruiser harder toward the cliff. The rear tires of my cruiser slipped over the edge of the embankment. The back of the vehicle dropped violently. The undercarriage slammed against the sharp rocks. My stomach dropped. I was angled upward, staring straight up at the night sky. The black water of the lake was churning wildly just a few feet below my rear bumper. I had exactly 1 second. 1 second before the center of gravity shifted completely, and the cruiser tumbled backward into the deep water. I grabbed the steering wheel with both hands. I locked my elbows, and I slammed my heavy police boot completely down on the accelerator pedal. The engine roared, pushing maximum torque to the all-wheel drive system. The front tires, still gripping the solid asphalt of the highway lane, bit down hard. The rubber burned against the road, filling the air with thick white smoke. For a terrifying, agonizing second, the cruiser held completely stationary, suspended in a brutal tug-of-war between the horsepower of the engine and the crushing strength of the tentacles in the lake. The metal frame groaned. The engine whined. Then the front tires caught traction. The cruiser violently jerked forward. The sudden, explosive forward momentum ripped the vehicle right out of the grip of the rotting corpses. I heard a wet, sickening, tearing sound. The skeletal hands gripping the window frame were physically ripped away from the tentacles. The cruiser launched forward, climbing over the edge of the embankment and slamming hard onto the flat asphalt of the highway. The rear tires caught the road, propelling the vehicle forward like a missile. I didn't let off the gas. I kept my foot floored. I looked in the rearview mirror. The massive, wet tentacles were writhing on the gravel shoulder, aggressively slapping the ground where my cruiser had just been. The rotting bodies of the family dangled limply from the ends of the appendages. As I sped away, the things slowly pulled the tentacles back down the embankment, dragging the skeletal puppets beneath the black, churning surface of the lake, disappearing without a splash. I drove at over 110 miles per hour down the county highway. I didn't turn on my sirens. I didn't radio dispatch to tell them what happened. I just drove, staring straight ahead, gripping the wheel until my hands went numb. I didn't stop until I saw the bright, artificial canopy of this fuel station. I pulled under the lights and threw the cruiser into park. I've been sitting here ever since. I've checked the passenger side of my vehicle. The window is completely shattered. The heavy metal doors are deeply dented, crushed inward by a massive circular pressure. And sitting on the passenger seat, resting amidst the broken glass, are 3 severed, skeletal fingers, completely coated in thick, foul-smelling lake mud. I am not going back to the station. I'm leaving the keys in the ignition, and I am walking away from this job. I don't care about the rules anymore. I'm writing this on my phone and posting it here as a direct warning to anyone driving alone at night. If you are traveling down a desolate highway near a large body of deep water and you see a vehicle driving slowly, drifting over the lines, trying to get your attention, do not stop. Do not pull over to help them. Just keep driving.